This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, and welcome to October 2020 Tech Talk Monday. We have a regular Tech Talk every first Monday of the month. And this Tech Talk is designed to give you guys an insight into some of the technology that is being used to develop software. The aim of this Tech Talk is to build both your managerial knowledge, but most importantly, your technical knowledge. The title for this month's Tech Talk is Introduction to Web Development with HTML and CSS. And the presenter is Hygienist Okay, who is a web developer at Digital Echoes and Advanced Careers UK. And so if you have any question, please just take note of the question. Wait until the point where he does some practical stuff, and then you can ask your question. You can also invite your friends to join in whilst the TED Talk is on its way. So I'm going to give the mantle to Hygienist to
Hello, everyone. Can anyone hear me?
Hello. Hello. Yes, you can. Carry on.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Monday Tech Talk, Introduction to Web Development with HTML and CSS. Before I start, I would like to ask if anyone has any idea about web development or have anything to say about web development. Any idea, any skill? What have you known about web development? Have you heard anything about HTML or CSS? Anyone in the house? Hello,
Hi.
can you hear me?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Ola. I've done
Hello.
HTML.
Abuchi.
I did HTML. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Salah.
I don't know.
Okay. So I'll just go ahead to start up this this tech talk. So these are the contexts for today's tech talk. We are going to be talking about the internet. We're going to be talking about web development. Who is a web developer? What are the technologies involved in web development? And what are the tools does a developer work with? Also, we're going to do an intro into HTML and CSS. Then we are going to spin up a little project, and at the end of the project, we're going to have an interactive section where everyone will get to ask one or two questions about the project. So now we're going to be talking about the internet. The internet is a globe system of interconnected computer networks that allow users to communicate and share files within devices. So you could have the idea that an internet is like a platform, it's a global platform where you could share resources. Like I want to send images to someone, I want to send a mail to someone, I'll be able to do that through the internet. So if you have this understanding what the internet is all about, then you can now move your career or push your career into web development. Now, when we talk about web development, we talk about designing website. That's the basic concepts that everybody knows about web development. When we talk about web development, it's just basically designing websites, and all those websites they run on the internet. So you could see the relationship between the internet and web development. So if you're designing a website, you should know that those websites will run on the internet. And as you're designing websites, you're sharing informations. Those informations are being transmitted through the internet. So that being said, then who is a web developer? So if we understand that web development is the art of building websites, then a web developer is someone who builds website. So a web developer, basically the responsibility is to program or write codes that tells a website how to function. So the web developers spin up websites from scratch to finish and host those projects on the internet where you get to see those websites on the internet. Now, we're going to talk about the technologies involved in building a website, or the technologies involved in becoming a web developer, the things you need to know, the technologies you need to pick up. So according to Microsoft, web technologies includes this following. Number one is a markup language, such as HTML, CSS, XML, HTTP, and the rest of that. These markup languages are usually tied to a front end or client side technologies. So you could hear someone telling you, okay, I'm a front end developer. That means the person is basically on the client side technologies. So the person knows how to use HTML, how to use CSS, how to use HTTP requests, and how to do some XML codes. Then the next stage is the next group of technology is the back end or the server side technology. Here it's more of the programming language and technology. So you get people saying, I'm a back end developer. That means I know how to use Java, I know how to use VS Code, I know how to use PHP, I know how to use .NET. So these are programming languages that are associated with the back end side of this technology. Another aspect is the web server or the server technology. Now, the server is where this website sits on. After you're done designing this website, where do you host this website? So this website sits on the web server. So there are technologies that are also attached to a web server. Another aspect of web technologies is the database. Now, data has to do with information, storage of information in a computer network. So as you're designing or you're building websites, there are some points where you need to store data. There are some points where you need to share data and resources. So that aspect of those technologies you need to achieve this is the database. You could help people talk about MySQL database, Oracle database, and the rest of that. So this technology is also involved in web development. Another technology is the business application. These are customized for execution of tasks on a network. Maybe you want to have several systems running your application on the internet so that once one server is down, the other server will pick up. So these are just business applications. So basically, according to Microsoft, these are the basic web technologies. So when you find out someone mentioning his stack as a full stack developer, that means the person knows how to use all these technologies. You can specialize in one technology, you can decide to be a full stack developer. So when you're talking about HTML, CSS, you're basically a front end developer. And when you talk about codes like Java, PHP, .NET, you are basically a back end developer. And when you talk about web server technologies, you're a DevOps developer. You talk about DevOps, managing server resources, and the rest of that. And when you talk about the database aspect, you're a data administrator. So all these technologies make up the technologies used in building a website. Are we following?
Yes.
All right, that's cool. So if you look at this picture here, you could see several logos for different applications, different technologies. You could see SQL Server, you could see .NET, you could see C++. C++ is a back-end technology. You could see HTML and the rest of that. So these are the various technologies that makes up web development. The next we are going to talk about is what are the tools the web developers use while creating websites. So these tools help developers to work with various technologies. I just mentioned the technologies earlier. So a developer works with a browser, right? All websites runs on the browser. A developer works with a text editor. A text editor helps a developer to write like MySQL servers and the rest of that. So this, when we talk about web development tools, we talk about the tools a web developer uses to achieve or design website. Just like when we talk about a carpenter, you talk that we could associate carpenters tools like hammer, saw, chisels, and the rest of that. So when it comes to web development, we talk about things like Node, we talk about things like NPM, we talk about the browsers, we talk about VS Code, Sublime Text, Notepad, depending on what you're using to develop your website. So if you're building up a career, or if you're understanding or you're going into web development, with time you get to know other tools, but the basic tool to start up your web development is a text editor. A text editor allows you to just write your codes about your website. You write the codes for your website. So when you get into the field more, you get to understand more other tools you need to achieve some certain tasks in web development. So having said that, we are going to start with the front-end development technology, which I mentioned earlier, which is HTML. HTML is like the basic, is like the backbone to web development. You need to understand what HTML is before you start talking about writing or building websites. So when we talk about HTML, we say HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So it's like a standard language for creating websites. So it's like the basic for creating website. So HTML describes how a website should look like, the structure of a website. We're going to talk about this in a bit. Then it consists of elements. So as you're building websites, you intend to add several things to the website. The essence of building a website is actually passing information or sharing information through the internet. Maybe you have a business that's into soap making and you want to advertise that on the internet. A good way to advertise that's your business is by using a website, by building a website for that. So in that your website, you want to advertise what type of soap you're making, where is the location of the company, how can you get to reach us, how can you buy products from us. So these are informations you want to be dishing out from the website. So how are you going to achieve that? You're going to be adding those informations as elements. So HTML consists of several elements. Some of these elements can be images, can be videos, can be text, can be paragraphs, can be headings. So HTML gives you so that you could be able to add those elements to your website and communicate well the information you want to pass to your user through the website. So those HTML elements tells the browser how to display those contents. So if I tell the HTML that I want an image on the website, I need to use a tag that is associated with image. If I want a video, I need to use a HTML element that is associated with video. We are going to talk more about that when we start doing the project. So HTML labels pieces of content such as this is heading, this is paragraph, this is a link. So these are some of the contents we are going to be looking at in this class. Then to start up, we need to understand how the structure of HTML works. How do you go about writing HTML codes? So you need to understand the structure of HTML. So if you're to start writing HTML, if you look at the image here, you could see that there's a doc type HTML, there's HTML, there's head, there's title, there's another head, there is a paragraph. We're going to talk about this in a bit, but I just need to explain some bits into the structure. So before you design, every website you find in the internet comes up with this basic structure. So any website you see must have this basic structure. So the first thing you see there, there's an ankle brace and there's an exclamation mark with the doc type HTML. What this tells the browser is that, okay, you're trying to write something, you're trying to write HTML program, or you're trying to write a HTML document. And this type of HTML, because there are levels to HTML, there are different versions of HTML. And this version is HTML5. So when someone writes something like this, it tells the browser that this is HTML5. Then the next tag is the element tag for the root. So this actually just tells that, okay, this is an HTML page, that everything within, there's an opening tag and a closing tag. If you look at the HTML, at the top after the doc type. Below it, below the whole content, you could see a slash HTML at the ending. So there's a kind of a tag, which is the opening tag and the closing tag. So, but the doc tag doesn't have a tag close, but for the HTML, you could see a tag, the opening tag and the closing tag. This tells the browser that anything within here is attributed to HTML. This is an HTML document. So the next one is the title element. The title element just explains, okay, the title of this document, this HTML document. So assuming I have a site that talks about, let's say, I'm into photography. I have a studio. So I might call the title of this website is, let's say, my studio website. So the title shows up on the browser when you open those sites. So another part is the body element. The body element also has, just like the title has opening and closing and is in between the head tag. That is, the head tags are for descriptions about your web pages. Then the body tags actually consist of the elements like the images, the tables, the lists, the headings, the paragraphs you add on your website. So everything you're going to add, like images, like text, you are going to add those elements between the opening tag and closing tag of the body element. So everything sits here. Then inside the body element, we have just some basic element like the H1 element and the P element. We're going to talk about that in a bit. I don't know, is this clear, the structure of the HTML? Because this is the basic dive into HTML. If you don't get the structure, well, you won't really understand what I'm going to do in the next couple of slides.
Let me add to that.
All right.
Great. So let's take this HTML snippet that we see like our notebook. Okay. So on your notebook, when you open it first, you will see the header where you can write the heading. At the top, it is usually the bigger bit of the notebook, and the bottom bit of the notebook will be smaller. And then in between the head and the bottom is the cells for you to write your note, like maybe your paragraphs or so. So it is the same structure they use with HTML. So the very top bit will be the header. In between the header will be the body where you can write your paragraphs, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, which can become 3. Then the bottom will now be the end part, then you close it out. So just see this as your normal notebook with the header, the body, and then the footer. That will give you a clear understanding, and you decide how long your paragraph will be, which will be like the different sections you see on the website. I hope Hajin, that is okay.
Yeah, that's good. So this is like the basics to web development, as HTML is the basic to web development. So you need to understand this structure. This structure gives you a guide to doing more complex thing on the web development. So I will head on to the next slide where I will talk about these elements. So I made mention of HTML elements like the image, the text, the tables, list, and the rest of it. So HTML element is defined by a start tag and some content and an end tag. So you find out that you have opening tag, closing tag, and within the opening and closing tag, there's a content in that element. So you will look at the snippet I added below. You could see that what goes first is the tag name. Then what next is the content you're adding on that tag. Then it has a closing tag. So for example, what we have here is the H1 tag. The H1 tag is called the heading tag. So there are different kinds of heading. When you have a notebook, there are paragraphs, there are headings that you want to make the main headings, and there are headings you want to make subheadings. So this tag helps you to create such a scenario which you have on your notebook, having top heading, subheading, and the rest of that. So if you look at that, if you attribute that to this, you could say that maybe your H1 element will be the top heading, then the H2 element will have like a head into what you have with the H1 element. We are going to look at about this in a bit when I start writing the codes for it. So we just need to understand that elements have opening tag and closing tag, and they have content in between. So what we have here is H1 and P element. P element is for the paragraph. In case you want to write a paragraph, you use your P element to write a paragraph. Okay, there are some tags that don't have elements, and there are some tags that don't have end elements. There are several tags like that, but when you dive deeper into this, you get to find out more tags that don't have elements and that don't have content and end tags. An example of them is the break tag, which is the BR, which you're seeing there on the code snippet. So the BR doesn't have the content and it doesn't have the end tag. So that's basically what HTML elements are. Just look at the HTML elements as like media content you add on your website, be it a text, be it a video, be it a table, be it a list, be it animations. These are like elements you add to your HTML documents. But before you will be able to do that, there's a standard to that. And that standard is having a opening tag and a close tag when necessary, and having the content added to that tag. So we're going to look about, when we start writing the codes for our project, we're going to explain more about this. So next slide I want to talk about is CSS. So CSS stands for cascading style sheets. So just look, just see CSS as a kind of adding styles to your HTML elements. Assuming I add a text or I add a paragraph, it comes out with a basic color, which is black. Or assuming I add a video and I want to do some styling to those videos, I'll be able to do that with CSS. So CSS is a front-end technology in web development that allows you to style your component. As the name goes, cascading style sheets. So it just describes how those elements are supposed to be displayed on the screen, either a paper or other medias. And it goes beyond just placing the elements or deciding when the elements are to be placed. It goes beyond that. It goes to coloring the elements, it goes to styling the elements, goes to doing some animations and the rest of that. So you can see websites where there are some animations and some slides. So this can be achieved with CSS. So just look at your HTML as adding content to your website, while your CSS is used for styling those content on the website. So I will go ahead to talk about how do you use CSS? What's the syntax for using CSS? So if you look at the code snippet here, I have my H1 element. My H1 element is HTML element. It's not a CSS element. It's HTML element. And this time around, I want to style my H1 element. And what I have here is I'm changing the color and I'm changing the size of the font. So if you look at this code snippet, you need to select the element you want to style. And that's why we have the H1 with the attribute at the top, say selector. So I'm selecting H1 and I'm giving it these declarations. So the declarations here you could see are inside a curly brace. Now, one of the properties I can change or manipulate with CSS for H1 element is by changing the color. So you could see I mentioned the property called color, then I went ahead to choose what kind of value I want to give to that color. And you could see I selected blue. And once you're done with a declaration, a CSS declaration, the syntax is to end with a semicolon. So that's why you're seeing the semicolon there. So I'm done with a single declaration, which is the color, and I've changed the color to be blue. Then I did a second declaration where I changed the size of the font of the H1 element. Here I decided that the font size should be 12 pixels. Now you don't get to know all these properties now, but as you move into the field of web development, you get to understand some of these properties and get to know what values you can assign to those properties. So a recap of what is here: the selector points to the HTML element you want to style. then the declaration blocks contains one or more declaration separated by semicolons. So the semicolon needs to be there as a syntax in CSS. Then each declaration includes a CSS property, like I just mentioned, the color, and you need to give it a value before you end with a semicolon. So you need to have a color, you need to have a property and a value. The multiple CSS declarations are separated with semicolon, and declarations block are surrounded by curly brace, like I just mentioned. So I could just write H1, a curly brace, and choose a color and assign a value to it. So that's the syntax of CSS. So this is a code snippet. For example, I have a P element on my HTML and I want to change the color and the text alignment of that P element. So what I just did was to just add the color and set the value to red, add the text align and set the color to center. So that's a P element, a P selector in CSS. And I just assigned the color property and the text align property to it. I hope this is clear. I'll write on to the project where we're going to do a simple landing page with HTML and CSS. Then after that, we're going to talk about, ask some questions about everything I've mentioned earlier before now. So to start a project, I just mentioned the various tools you can use, and one of those tools is like a text editor. Your text editors helps you to write those commands, those codes, and your browser helps you to like render what you have written. So I have a text editor. There are various types of text editor. There's Notepad, there's Notepad++, there's VS Code, there's Sublime Text, there's Atom, there's a lot you could research about them. And each text editor has its own uniqueness and values which they render. So, but me personally, I advise that if you're diving into HTML and CSS for the first time, I advise you use Notepad. Notepad doesn't give you hints to some of these commands, so you get to write those commands from your head, and that way you get acquainted with those commands and the syntax. But as a developer, I need a tool that will make me to be more faster, and that's why I'm using VS Code, because VS Code gives me hints on some of these things. I don't need to start cracking my head to put down some certain lines of code. But if you're starting up in this career, you just need a notepad to start up with. So you could get your notepad. Your notepad is depending on the operating system you're using. This is Windows. I could just search on Notepad and I have my notepad opened here. So I could just go ahead and start typing the structure as I mentioned earlier. And definitely once I'm done writing my codes, it will show up on the browser. I hope you guys are seeing what I'm doing.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I would advise, if you're diving into this, you need the notepad, use the notepad. But for this class, I'm going to use another text editor, which is VS Code. VS Code was developed by Microsoft. So this is how the VS Code should look like. Sorry, I have some projects open. Let me open a new project. So this is my VS Code environment. It's going to look a little bit strange, but you get used to it. So this is like an editor that helps me to write my codes. So that's being said, another tool you need is the browser. So there are several browsers on this on the internet. I prefer using Chrome. Let me open my Chrome browser. This is my Chrome browser. I prefer using Chrome, and there are other two browsers to this. You could use Firefox, you could use Microsoft browser and the rest of that. I would advise you use Chrome or Firefox. That's the basic two browsers. Then if I want to design a website, if I'm writing codes that has to do with the back end, then I'll have to talk about servers. I'll have to talk about a server to host those projects. But I'm not doing a server-side programming language. I'm doing the front end, so I don't need any machine or any tool to run my codes. So what I just need basically is the browser. The browser will run the codes for me. So what I would do is I'll just choose a location where I want to save that particular project. So, and I'm using my desktop as the storage location for this website we're building. So I'm going to right click and create a new folder, call that folder landing page, for example. And once I have created this folder, I'll need to create the files, that's the HTML files and the CSS files that will help me to build my website. So to do that, on my VS Code, I could just create a new file at the top, click on new file. Then I'll save this file using my Command S or Control S, depending on which operating system you're using. So I'm now going to locate the landing page on the desktop. Then I'm going to give this file name index. So there's a reason for this. You could give yours home or landing page, depending on what you want to achieve. But the index, if you're running this on the server, if you have thousands of pages, the index will be the first page that will be rendered on the server before other pages. So I'm going to use index. The name depends on you. So, but I'm using index for this. Then I need to tell what type of file is this? What's the extension of this file? I'm going to use .html. This tells me that I'm writing HTML file, right? So I'll click on save and I have my file on the desktop. So I'll just check it out there. And if I open the folder, you can see the index.html. That's fine. So the first thing I need to do, if we look at the slide of the intro, I talked about the structure of HTML. That is the first thing you need to do. You need to put up the structure as the first thing you need to do. So I have some tools here that helps me to create that without writing all over the structure. Again, that's why I'm using VS Code. But if you're using Notepad, you have to write out the structure one after the other. So let me just quickly explain this. This tells me that I'm writing HTML5. There are various versions to HTML. The latest is HTML5. Previous version was 4. And this tells me that I'm writing HTML. If you look at this, there's the opening tag and the closing tag here. Then there's a little description here, which is an attribute that tells me that the language is English. Then I have my header that gives description of this page. So I'm going to, not to confuse us, I'm going to remove this and basically remove also the language if that is going to confuse us. So we'll just have the basic structure. And this is the title. The title of this, I could give this Tech Talk Monday as the title of this website. So I need to look at what I've done now. So to look at that, you go to the folder and open with a browser. By default, Chrome is the browser I've selected for this. So if you have other browser, you could just right click and open with, choose the kind of browser you want to open with. You can see Firefox here and the rest of it. So I'm just going to open this. And this is what I have. It's blank, there's nothing there, but this is a HTML document. And you can see at the top, Tech Talk Monday. That tells me the title of this website. So having said that, I'm going to add some elements so you could see how those elements are being added. So I have the H1 element, and I said H1 element I use for title. If you look at this element, I have the opening tag and I have the closing tag. What's so special about the closing tag is that there's a stroke in before the element, the name of the element. So the name of the tag, there's a stroke there. I think this is a backwards stroke. So, and the content of this, let me say this is heading one element. I'll save this, I'll go back to my browser, and I'm going to refresh the page, and you get your heading one element written over there. So there are more to this. I think this has up down to heading 6. So I'll just basically change this to 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'll do that for the closing tags as well. Cool. So you could see the difference within those elements. We have our HTML element and H1 element, H2 element. So you could see H2 is more smaller than H1. So you could decide to use your H2 as a subheading to H1, and you could decide to use your H3 as a subheading to H2. Yeah, having said that, I'm going to pull up this. That's about our heading elements. So I'm going to just add the content. I'm going to change this content to welcome to tech talk Monday. So I'll refresh. I have this welcome to tech talk Monday. So I'm going to basically maybe look for an image that will show the presenter of this tech talk. So I'm going to go to unsplash.com. It's a free website where you get images without copyright. So I'll look for like a web developer. Okay, cool. I have this image, so I could just click on this image and right click in there. I could save this image. I'm going to save the image right on my landing page folder. Then let me download the image first. I'm going to download it first. So I'll click on download. The image is downloading. So just wait for the image to download. So I could go ahead and get it from my downloads. So I'll copy the image and go to the folder where I have landing page. I'm going to create another folder for my images. So I'll have my images in one folder. So I'll paste that there. I'll rename the image to, let's say, the tutor. And I'll go back to my code. Now, if I want to add images in my website using HTML, I'm going to use an element for that, and that element is called img. That is the element for adding image in websites. So if I'm to add this, I'm going to tell the location of the image. That's where you see the source, the location, and I'm going to tell what happens if that image is not found. That would be the alternative. So the alternative, I'm going to add a text that tutor, and the source of the image is inside the folder called images, and the name of the image is tutor.jpg. That's the extension of the image. So if I go back to the website, this is our Tech Talk Monday. If I refresh, you could see the image here, and it's way too big. So I could do more by adding a width of, let's say, I want a width of, let's 200 pixel. and I want the height of, let it be auto. I'll refresh that, and this is it, 200. I think 200 is too small, so I'm going to increase it more and make it less than 600. Good. Then the next thing I want to do, I've shown how to add image content, I've shown how to add text, heading text. So I want to add maybe a description of what this tech talk is all about. So I'll go to the internet, look for text I can use. Usually I use Lorem. Lorem is a free online site where you can generate text. So I'm basically going to go to Lorem and pick, let's say, let me pick this as the text I want to pick and to use this. So when I go to my code, I need to add a paragraph and I'll paste the text there, which I've copied from the internet. I'm pasting that text. I'll refresh on the website we're building, and this is the text I just added. Then every website has like a footer that tells the copyright or when this website was built. So I'm going to add another paragraph at the bottom after this paragraph that says copyright at Advanced Career. So that should be. So this is the copyright at Advanced Career. So if you look at this site now, we just have basic content. It doesn't look so awesome, but at least you're passing information right now. Back then, when the website started, websites are usually like this, not so beautiful. But nowadays, you could see website with a lot of designs and animations. So we are going to now move to the CSS part of it, where we are going to style this the way we want it to actually look like. So I could, to help me style this on the header, I need to add what is called style tag. So the style tag houses the different styles I'm going to be writing on this page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the H1, which is, if you look at the presentation I made earlier, once you style an element, you need to select the element using your H1 or the name of the element. So if I want to style the image, I'll use IMG. If I want to style the paragraph, I'll use P, and I'll add my curly brace. Then I could go ahead and add so many things I want to style. So I want to say maybe the color. I want to set the color to red. And when I refresh, you could see that my H1 element is now red. So that's the way you could style your element. So, but I'm going to style this more. I'm going to introduce more elements. And that element I'm going to introduce is a div element on my HTML. So the div element sounds like a container. So I'm going to take the H1 into this div element, and it looks like a container wrapping the H1 element. So I'm going to style the div element, and I'm going to associate this div, like I'm going to name it. I'll say ID. I'm going to give it a heading, ID with a heading. This way, I could want to style this div, but instead of using div, I could use heading. But that way, I will need to add my hashtag and use the word heading. That way, I'm referring to this ID called heading. So if I want to style this, I could say the background color of this should be red, and the text of this H1 should be white, rather. So when I refresh, you could see that container which I've added, rounded. So I could add more spacing within the heading, within this div with a red color. I could add more spacings around it. So I could achieve that by using CSS property called padding, and I could set the padding to be 20 pixel. So you get to know all these properties when you dive into this, and I'm just showing you what you can achieve with this. So that's what the padding does now. Added some space to it. So I kind of don't like the padding, so I'm going to reduce it a little bit. Okay, this is fine. Then I want the text to be at the center. So remember my H1 element. So I could add more attributes, more styling to this. So I could say text align. I could make it center. If I refresh, that looks at the middle. Cool. So the next thing I will do is I'll add another div. And this div, I want to group the image and this paragraph text which I've added into it. So I'm going to put that in here. And I'm going to give this div an ID called content. So once I have this, I could then style it by using the hashtag, calling the name content. And I will add a padding around it. I want to add a padding of 15 pixel. And I'll refresh. Okay, cool. The next thing I want to do, I want the image and the text to be on the same page. So I'm going to do that by using the CSS property called float, and I'll assign a value float left. That way, the image and the text should float. To know what happened, let me. Okay. All right. Let me try something. Content. I want a situation where this text is going to be beside the image. So I'm going to, don't know why this is not working, but let me use another property called display. I'm going to use flex for that. So fine. So I'm using another property called flex to do that. So what it means is every content inside this div will go side by side to each other, just like the image and the text. They are side by side to each other. So, and what next I want to do is I want to add a spacing between the image and the text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the content and I'll reference the image. I'll add a padding of let's say 10 pixel to it. That way there's a little big spacing, and I also do that to the paragraph. I'll say content and the paragraph. I'll add the spacing of 10 pixel also to it. That looks cool. Then I'll have to duplicate this content. I want to duplicate the paragraph so I have enough content on this. So you could see that each content are floating to each other because of the flexbox I've added. The last section is the footer section. So I could go ahead and add a div as well to group this section of the footer. Then I will give this div an ID, that is a name. So I will use that to reference it when I'm styling. I'll call this the footer. So I'll reference that footer, and then I'll give it a color, background color black or black. And I will give a text color. I'll give you a background black, then I'll add some spacing using a padding of, let's say, 10 pixel, or let's make it 15 pixel. That's fine. Then I'll reference the P element in this footer. So to reference that, I'll have to call the footer and reference the P element. Then I would set the color of that P element to be white. Then I would set it to be center, text align center. Then I'm going to refresh this. You could see the footer, right? What next I'm going to do, I want this footer to be at the bottom. So I will reference the footer and say position to be fixed. That's another property. So don't worry about all this property. When you dive in, you're going to learn more about all this. Then I'm going to say bottom 0 and set a width of 100%. That's fine. So now we have something like that looks like a website, and there are more to this. And the interesting part of this is that you can just go to any website and you can see the codes and the HTML that was used to build that website. So if I should right click on this and click on views page source code, you will see the codes, the whole code which I've written. And this code is exactly what I've written in here. So if you look at it, I started with the HTML, the doc type, and these are my stylings. And these are the contents which I've added to the HTML body and the footer. So you could go to any website, like we're on Lorem now. I could right click and say view source code, and I'll see the whole code. And you could see they started with doc type HTML, HTML header. So every website starts with this. So you could look at the header, you could look at the body, you could see what they are doing. And each website ends with the body and the HTML tag. So that is how they came about having all these websites. So basically, your HTML gives you like the basics to it. You need the HTML to start writing or building website. Then the CSS will talk about, when I added this content, it was looking awkward. It was not looking so nice. But at the end of tweaking with CSS and HTML, I was able to come up with something that looks presentable, but not that so super, but you could have something you could show up. Because of time, we could make this more interesting. We could add some animations and do more to this. So I haven't said that. I think we almost done with this. So we're going to have our interactive section where I'm going to entertain some questions and give some answers to those I can. But before then, you could go online and get resources. And where to access your resources, you could go online. There are different platforms online where you could get resources and learn more about this. You search online, or you could attend a boot camp or a training academy, just like Advanced Career, where you could get those skills given to you at high quality standard, and you get to learn and do more with web development. That being said, any question?
Thank you, Hyginus, for a very powerful presentation.
Thank you.
I was enjoying it so much I didn't wish it stopped. I know I have a good understanding of what you're saying, but for some it's completely fresh. Even though it's fresh, at least it's giving you guys a quick insight into how web development is basically easy. The template, the HTML template will always be the same thing each time you're creating a new page. You have your doc type, HTML, the header, the body, and then the footer, and then you can start putting in headers here and there, just like your paragraph. Obviously, this is just like an introduction. There are still more things to add to that, but what he has shown us today, anyone can do it within a day. So that said, I believe some people will have some questions, and hygienists will be able to answer them. Any question?
Yes, David. How long does it take for one to become good at this?
Okay. Depending on the stacks you're picking up, like if you're picking up the front end stack, there's a time frame for that. If you're picking up the back end stack, the time frame for that. But it also depends on the individual, the IQ of the individual, how fast is the individual, and how much time is the individual putting in. So, like if you want to pick HTML and CSS, that should take you. The HTML should take you like 2 weeks to pick it up if you put in more tax, if you put in more time, and you're able to pick at a very high IQ, very high speed. Then the CSS, it could take you a month to go around CSS, but doesn't make you a pro with what you have learned. What makes you a pro is getting your hands doing some projects, doing some certain stuffs with those skills which you have acquired. So it all depends on your time, you're the kind of person, and that's just it, basically.
Yeah, thank you.
So as he said, it depends on your effort you put in. Front-end development is like part of our programs that we are launching very soon. And the great thing is that when you complete the program with us, with Hygienus, you can then work on some projects to start building your own extra skills and confidence as well. And I also encourage, if you have any young one around that basically have nothing to, they're not doing something really tangible. For some of us here, we already are advanced. We know where our focus is. We are very clear with our career path, but you can still learn this on the second, on the side. But if you also have young cousins, brother, kid between the age of 10 and above, this can also be a good starting point for them, so that by the time they get to 20, they are building fantastic website. They might not even need to go to university, but they have a guaranteed job ready for them. Okay. Any other question? We are running out of time. If you have a question, please do. I know it's a bit technical stuff, but before I start asking my own question, though.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Juliet. I want to ask a question.
Okay.
My question, I just want to know the types of extension that you use in HTML.
The type of what?
Exemptions.
Extensions.
Okay, extensions.
Yes.
When you say extension, is it for the naming the document or what?
Yes, inside the document.
For HTML, you only use .html. When you start doing CSS as an external file, you use .css. When you do JavaScript, you use .js, depending on what language you're writing. But for HTML, it's only .html.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hygienist, I have a second question for you.
All right.
You mentioned HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but you never did anything on JavaScript during this presentation. Is that something as an addition to or incorporated within CSS and HTML?
Please,
Okay.
please, who asked the question? Who asked the question, please?
Duke.
Okay, okay.
All right, Jude. This JavaScript is a front-end technology, but
Okay.
over time, JavaScript has grown beyond being a front-end technology. JavaScript is now also a back-end technology. When you start talking of Node, for example. So, but basically what your JavaScript does for you is it improves the interactiveness of your website. Like when you go to a website and you try to click some buttons, you see some animations, or while you're trying to scroll, there's some animations. Like if I should hover on this text might swap from each other and the rest of that. So JavaScript gives you that life to your website. So that's what basically JavaScript does. But because of the time frame, I will not be able to show you guys how to do some certain stuff with JavaScript. It's just the scope of this tech talk is just basically HTML and CSS.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, if we were going to JavaScript, we would have been pushing the limit for today. I can see a lot of people are not asking questions because of
How technical.
yes, probably first time they are seeing these things work. So basically HTML is like the foundation, CSS adds color, while JavaScript adds animation. And the three of them works about Hydros I just pointed out as well. JavaScript has grown into a platform that includes both back end and front end with the Node.js, which is like the last few years has become very powerful in building a complete website from both back end and front end. All right, so
Hi, can I ask a question?
yes.
Hi, it's Abuchi. Hi,
Okay.
Junus. Can someone use something like Dreamweaver to achieve this particular thing? Is it something that is being used? Is it advisable to is it advisable to let Dreamweaver as part of the tools for web developing?
That's a good question, Abuchi. Dreamweaver is a tool for web developers, but it's basically what I would say for Dreamweaver is the lazy programmers that you don't want to do this lots of coding and you just want to do drag and drop. But behind the scene, Dreamweaver is generating the codes for you. And if you look at the code after dragging and drawing those, like if I want to add image, I just need to just click, select the image and select the location of the image and drop it on the website and it comes out that way. But if you want to really go into development, if you want to really go into web development, you need to understand these basics. And that's why you need to look at the codes and learn the codes, not usually doing drag and drop. At the end of the day, you don't know what is behind, what are the mechanisms behind those websites you're creating with Dreamweaver. So Dreamweaver is like more of a content, drag and drop content stuff for building websites. So you don't, if you learn Dreamweaver, you might end up not knowing those basic codes. But if you want something that you just start up with immediately and build website as fast as possible, then you can use Dreamweaver or other content management tools like WordPress. But you don't really get to understand where and how these technologies work. So behind the scenes, those things have been done for you, but you don't really understand it. So if you're looking for a placement as a web developer or something like that, they don't expect you to just know that. They expect you to really understand the mechanisms and the technologies and how these things work behind the scene. So if you're being given a task, the most code bases like Facebook, Google, and the rest of that, they don't use all those technologies to build websites. They code from scratch. So if you have been incorporated to those companies, you're going to see a code base that shows things like this. So Dreamweaver, you might not end up seeing stuff like this. So that's just it. So the coding activity gives you more more understanding of how the web development works.
Yeah, okay.
Does
Thank
that
you
answer
very
your
much.
question?
Yes, yeah, you did. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. I hope we learned one thing or two regarding web development today. As I said, the aim of Tech Talk is introducing you to the technical bit of your role and also help you to communicate with other team members as well, and probably give you insight. You might not have grabbed most of the things that Hygiene spoke about, like parameters, etc., the properties, and calling up on some method or thereabout, but it gives you an introduction into that area, all right? And that is our objective. I hope that objective, we achieved our objective today. We're not making you
Yes.
developers.
Yes.
Did we?
Yes,
Yes.
this is magical, you know.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Pretty
Several people
interesting.
are muted. Ijoma, Titi Lokwe, you guys are not answering. Mark that.
And Juliet, stop.
Some people are running away. Huh? All right. So,
It's just a lot to put in the brain at once. So it's just, yeah, the process.
okay. The goal is not to make you a developer. You're not going to be writing code. That's not
I
the
know,
goal.
but then
Well,
it's good we have a bit of knowledge about it, though.
Exactly. So when next you speak to hygienists, you know when it starts telling you, okay, it's going to take me X amount of time, you can get an understanding. Okay.
Mm.
All right. So thank you guys for joining. The next Tech Talk will be happening the first Monday of November, and then the last one of the year will happen first Monday of December. To communicate the topic to you guys as I did the last couple of days as well. Thank you, Hygienists, for a very good and simple presentation. Thank you guys for turning up on time and spending the last about 1.5 hours with us. We appreciate it. The next one, please remember to share with your friends as well and get them to get a bit of technology. We all know that we are in a period where there will be serious challenges going forward. Everything is turning to technology, you know, so we want to build as much skills and experience as possible so that we are fully ready for the next wave of the tech job, okay, which they call, I've forgotten this name now, the digital jobs. So we want to be in a very powerful position, and that is the essence of this. I wanted to say something. Yeah, so another thing we are starting, probably to see on my status, is the referral scheme. So if you have anyone that you want to bring on board, we have a referral scheme that we are starting out as well. That is going to help us to grow. We want to grow. We have come a long way, and I think we have standardized our process and our program as well. So if you have anyone that you love and you want them to also be ready, be equipped both in practical and also theoretically, please, you can speak to me or speak to any of our members in advanced careers. So thank you guys for joining. Let me not take all of your time again. Until next time, have a wonderful evening. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David and Hagenius.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, Hagenius.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye. Thank you,
David.
Gina. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, David.